If you're a musician about to start teaching students on a one-to-one basis, whether that's instruments or singing, then this video is for you. I'm going to share some tips with you that are a game changer in how to keep and retain your students. And having taught both in the classroom and in a one-to-one setting over the last 25 years, these tips work in both settings. So I hope you're ready for them. I'm Rachel Hardman, and this is Passionate About Music Education. There are some core teaching strategies that you need to implement, whether it's in the classroom or whether it's in a one-to-one setting, to encourage retention. And so I'm going to go through some tips, and I hope they're really helpful. So make sure you write some of these down because they can be game changers. The first thing that we often forget, because we've been playing music for a long time, is what it's like for those students to go to their very first lesson. Often you are going to be teaching students in that elementary, primary age, and they will be nervous because they haven't had that one-to-one lesson with anybody. Particularly, they might not have had that in sports or coaching in that sense. So you might be the first one-to-one lesson that they have. So be aware that of course they'll be scared, and so will their parents if they're not musicians. You often find that parents are really supportive, but they don't really know or understand how to prepare their child. So in that introductory email conversation, explain the first lesson and what it's going to look like, whether they need a book or a notepad or a folder, where to meet you if you're working in a music centre, where to get to your house if you're teaching from home or if you're going to go to them. And just to give them those expectations so they know what they're expecting on that first lesson, because it does take away some of the nerves and fear you're going to encounter. I really think this one is overlooked. It's that you've got to remember that parents really often don't know much about music education or music teaching or what to go and get their child. You are the expert. So if you want them to buy a specific instrument or a specific book, give them that information, but also help them find it. So whether that's an online platform like Amazon, and you're going to encourage them there, but of course we want to support our local music shops, so encourage them to go and get the resources there. Now sometimes you might find, I know I have this problem where I currently live, is the music shop struggles to get everything in because it's all imported into Bermuda. So again, have a conversation with your local music shop. If you use a specific method book or a certain type of strings or a certain type of reeds, those music shops are actually really supportive and will go and get that in for you because they will know that your students are going to buy it from them. So build that rapport with your local music shops if you've got any in your area. But if you don't have them in your area and you're asking a parent to go and buy a book or an instrument or reeds, whatever it is, give them that information and the source that they could go and buy it from, because then your parents are more likely to buy it. There's nothing worse than trying to teach a student music and 6 weeks down the line they still haven't got that cello book or the clarinet book, whatever it is that you need, and you're struggling to make progress because they don't have the resources. So the more you make it easy for parents at that beginner stage and give them the exact places to go and get it, the better success you're going to have in keeping that retention and keeping that speed at the beginning stages of the music lessons. There'll always be a parent who doesn't follow your instrument advice and might buy something cheap on Amazon, and they'll buy the wrong instrument, and you can't stop that. But the more you give that information and why this specific instrument is better than another one and why you recommend it, then you've done as much as you can. I really think it's also important in those beginning stages that you're talking to the student about the fact that this is a hobby for life. It's a hobby that they can do well beyond school, into university, into their adult life as an amateur or as a profession, so that you're not just teaching them skills for the current immediate situation, but these skills will stay with them forever. And you're also then of course teaching life skills within your music lessons, teamwork, confidence, how to perform in front of an audience, communication, creativity, all of those wonderful things, which I already talk about in my other videos. If you haven't checked those out, the life skills that music education teaches. we teach that. So the more you talk to students about the wonderful skills that they're going to get from music, not just being able to play Hot Cross Buns and Twinkle Twinkle Little Star, but what else music gives, that is a lifelong hobby. They can do it right up until they retire and into retirement, is a fantastic way of keeping retention, because they see it's beyond school or beyond the immediate. I think in those early stages, you're trying to build a relationship with the student and the parents so that they believe in your instruction. They go away and do what you ask them to do between the lessons in that terms of practice, and that you keep them for a long time. So the more you share your expert knowledge and keep that consistency at the beginning is really important. That positivity in your lessons. And I really believe that we have to, as educators, move away from this sort of kind of teacher, I teach, you learn, to more of a coach. We're in this together. I'm going to give you the skills. I'm going to give you ideas, and you go away and practice them yourself. So it's more of a coaching. And in the same way as if they go to sports and they get that coaching, today we're doing football drills. What do you need to go away and work at, and give them that ownership of their learning, rather than today I'm going to teach you this and you're going to go and practice this one song. Because you often find, particularly the younger students, they will only practice the one song you've given them. They'll go home and say, I have to practice this piece, and they might be able to do it in 10 minutes if they've practiced properly, particularly those beginner piano pieces. But what you actually want to do is coach them to think for themselves and to go further in the book, and to give them that opportunity to grow for themselves and to be that reflective learner. So try to encourage that from day one. I always say to my students, this is the piece that we're going to work on. I often let them pick the piece on the page. Some of the method books that I have for like piano or flute, clarinet are fantastic, but not every song is fantastic, and not every song is suitable for the student. Or you might find that, if they're introducing the note B flat, there's like 7 songs. Do you really need to play all 7 songs? So again, I go to the student, which one would you like to play? And sometimes, and often they'll all pick different songs, but they have ownership, because once they have ownership, they're more likely to go away and practice, because they have had that choice. So little of education for young people is about choice until they get to about 15, 16, and maybe at that point can start picking their courses if they're doing GCSE, or maybe to high school, and they can start narrowing down what they want to do. But up until that point, they really have very little say and very little choice in their education in the general Monday to Friday. So the more we encourage them to think for themselves and to have that say, the more engaged they are in music making, but also in learning themselves. And we want them to be self-reflective learners. We want them to be critical learners. We want them to be creative. We want them to think for themselves, because we know we need those skills as we go into life and go into the workplace. So by giving students a chance to have some say in your teaching is really important, and that you get them to buy into choosing. The songs that you and I like might not be the songs that they like. Well, that's fine. We're not here to we're here to share a love of music and to share a development of music and an understanding of many different genres and styles. But it's not just for us to say these are the 10 pieces you must play and they're the only 10 pieces, because as soon as you start to narrow down what they're allowed to do, it suddenly becomes less fun. We want them to expand, go listen onto YouTube or Spotify or whatever, go and listen to music and really explore different genres. We're trying to get them to create their own voice and their own sound, and you can do that from the beginner stage. It's not just for those intermediate and advanced. Do that from the beginning, and you'll find that they do progress. They'll ask all those questions, and they'll want to know, how does my instrument work? How do I play classical saxophone compared to jazz saxophone? They'll want to know that, and the more you encourage that at the early stage, the quicker and faster they will go, and it will improve retention. I always think that you need to keep a balance between praise and criticism, and you need to definitely keep more praise within your lessons, particularly in one-to-one where parents are paying money for it. It's a huge outlay, and we forget that because obviously we love music and we've been through that system ourselves and we know the value of it. But if you're a parent, you're trying to pay $30, $40, $50 a week, and you've got to buy a read and you've got to buy a book, and then of course you've got all the other activities they do, it is an ongoing expense. So because it's an ongoing expense, we need to keep that balance of praise. Now, I'm not saying praise them for just turning up and playing one key, but when they are doing good work or when they are making progress, praise, give good supportive advice. And if they haven't practiced for a fortnight, which is again normal for students, particularly students who do many activities and are in a very demanding school curriculum where they're having to do lots of tests and assessments, and it will come at the same point. There will be weeks when students will come in and say, I'm really sorry I haven't practiced. Don't tell them off, ask them why, because you want them to be honest about it. If they say, well, actually, this week I've had 5 tests in school, then you're not going to be mad about that. If they go, well, actually, my parents had us going here, 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 and we were there, or my grandma was sick in a hospital, again, you're not going to tell them off. You're going to go, oh, okay, that. And if they're going, well, actually, I'm really struggling to find time to practice, which is often the case because they're not managing their time, then at that point you can talk about, well, how do we find 15 minutes or 20 minutes or half an hour to practice? Could you do it before school, like at 7 o'clock in the morning when you get up? Is it possible to do it then? Do you do it when you come in from school or come in from whatever event you've been doing after school and then you practice there, rather than leaving your practice till 9-10 o'clock at night when you've had all your homework and then done it? Because of course at that point you're tired and you're not going to play your best and you're going to wake the neighbours up and all the other stuff that goes on with music making. So it's really important to have those open conversations, because the student will already be disappointed that they haven't practiced, disappointed because they feel that they're letting you down, but actually they're letting themselves down, and they know that when they practice they make progress. So we have to kind of help them find good strategies into practicing. And if we're truly honest, there were weeks when we didn't practice and we turned up to our teacher and hoped that they didn't notice, and we tried to bluff our way through it, and sometimes we got away with it and most of the time we really didn't. And it's the same when you're teaching, you'll know the difference. So again, lots of praise, lots of encouragement when they're doing great, and then when you're giving feedback, try to not be too critical, keep that balance. It's like, how could they get better? Why wasn't it right? And how do they get better? Because it's all going to well say that sounds rubbish. Well, that's just demoralising. It's like, well, why was it rubbish? You should be able to, as a music educator, explain to them what they didn't do right and how they can make it better. Or even better, you get the student to be a self-reflector and go, okay, so you played that, and the student will go, oh, I didn't go very well. And you go, okay, well, why didn't it go well? Where was the areas of concern? And because you start asking the students why things were going wrong, they will start to really reflect on their learning, and it will make them a more efficient musician and better at going home and practicing. I do this from the very beginning stages of teaching instruments. I'm going, what didn't you, they go, so you play it through and you go, what went well? Okay, what would you improve next? If you were the coach, if you were the teacher, what would you tell yourself? And they'll come up with the answers. They go, well, I didn't tongue, I didn't breathe properly, I didn't play that rhythm, or I messed that bar up. And that gives you a chance to go in and focus on that bar and fix the areas that they're telling you that they're struggling with. Because then that way they are focusing on, how do I develop the things that I can't do at this moment, rather than just playing the beginning and getting the first like 5 lines right. And then that difficult middle section, usually the B section of the music, is the bit that they're not playing enough because they've done the 2 A's but they haven't done the B, and that's the bit to work on. So the more you teach students to be self-reflective on how can they develop, what was good about it, what do you need to do next, in that coaching style, rather than you just telling them, they will be much better at identifying what they're listening to and how they're playing, and then go away and work on it. So I often get students to break it down. So even at the beginner stage, play it through and go, what do you need to do next? And they'll go, I need to sort the rhythm out. Okay, so let's play it again. Really just focus on rhythm. Okay, got that sorted. Right, what else do we need to work on? It might be dynamics, it might be phrasing, it might be breathing, it might be tonguing, whatever it is for your instrument. The more you get them to recognise what they need to do from that early stage, the more efficient they will be, the more they'll believe in you and the process, and the quicker they'll make progress. And my last bit of advice, if you're just about to go into teaching one-to-one lessons, and again it applies to classroom as well, is have places for students to perform, have a goal to work to. Even if that is you recording them in your lesson and then just sending that file to their parent, obviously of course make sure that you've got permission to do all of that kind of stuff. Or it might be a virtual concert, or it might be just an informal tea time concert, or it might be something that you invite the parents in to come and hear that performance. Whatever it is, make sure there's a goal. Again, if we relate it to sport, which a lot of our music students go and do sport as well, is if you're on the football team and you go to all the practices, then you'll be playing on the team. You'll play a match, even if you only play 10 minutes, 15 minutes. The idea is there is an event. And that has to be the same for music. And it shouldn't just be an exam event. I know lots of teachers teach music exams, which are fantastic, but they do that for the whole year and they just study the scales and the free pieces the whole year. Well, that's okay, and they get the certificate, but when have they actually performed? When have they, experienced those nerves, apart from in an exam room with a stranger? We want children to enjoy music making and that ensemble playing as well. So try to make sure that you include opportunities for performance. And of course, once you've videoed it or recorded it or performed it, have that opportunity for self-reflection. Play it to the students. Because again, when you're playing, you're not necessarily in that beginner stage, really listening to what you sound like. You are playing. You're focused on getting the notes right and the rhythms right and making sure you don't squeak on your instrument. But you're not necessarily listening to the sound. That comes later when you become a much more experienced musician. So by playing them back their performance, they can hear really what went well. And again, if that student made one mistake, they'll tell you about it at the end. They'll go, I made a mistake, because that's generally what musicians do. But by listening to the recording, they'll hear that actually that one mistake wasn't as disastrous as they thought it was. And actually 99% of it was perfect. And that's what we need to work on in terms of keeping that retention. We need people to feel good about whatever they do. And music is such a beautiful hobby, such a rewarding experience. We want whoever's doing it is to find a way of expressing themselves internally to an audience and just enjoying it. So the more you can encourage opportunities for performance or showcasing their work, that is fantastic. I really hope some of these tips have been helpful if you're about to become a music teacher for the first time and you're going out into teaching one-to-one lessons. Again, it also applies to ensemble directing. It also applies to classroom music as well. So you find all of these tips will go into all those different areas. I hope you found this helpful. If you did, of course, like the video, make a comment, and of course subscribe. Thank you to all the people already liking and subscribing, writing comments. I do read them all and appreciate your support, and I'll be back here again soon. My name is Rachel Hardman and this is Passionate About Music Education.